Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, March 20th, 2023. Time for another show. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, I think everything is in order now. Those of you who are online and listening right at the very beginning and hear our musical intros I don't know how much you hear and how much does or doesn't come through on the stream that goes out from Netroots Radio. But occasionally you can tell when things are in disarray, when music, instead of fading in and out gently and melodically, is immediately cut off and replaced by something completely different. And that's when you know we're running a few precious seconds behind schedule. But those of you who've been watching all the basketball all weekend, or perhaps all during the second half of the work week last week, to your boss's dismay, or for that matter, much to his or her delight, we don't know. You know that precious seconds can make all the difference. Not here, because who cares what kind of music is playing? Lots of people are into the music, but all right. Well, what you're really here for, even if you're here for the music, is to hear it come in and out on time. And, well, all right. So we didn't get that done today, and it's an indication that things are in disarray. But that's the way of the world. And as you know, Dems like to be in disarray, and so I am too. All right. Let's see. Greg is lining up the Raft O stories. We already have that set. Oh, hey, I don't have my email open, so I'll open that up so I can see if any of you are trying to get through to us and redirect the show. And I gotta open up all the hashtags and make sure that all of the various channels of communication that you have with us are ready. Here is the John Shiflett morning toot via Mastodon. That did go, right? Didn't it? Okay. I think I have now. Okay, there we go. And a reminder from everybody, of course, to use that KITM hashtag. Thanks very much, John, to remember using that so that you can get that stuff out there and we can be ready to pass your good news on. He reminds everybody that today is Eastern Orthodox St. Patrick's Day. Yes, true. Well, sort of, kind of. We do it all on weekdays. The Eastern Orthodox don't recognize holidays on the weekends. I'm making that up, but as long as we're making up Eastern Orthodox holidays, why not make up the rules as well? All right, so the basketball weekend, if you were into it, I mean, I was semi-into it, like I probably let you know on... Was it on Thursday? Yeah, Thursday, where I said, oh my gosh, I haven't made the picks. I have to make them in about 15, 20 minutes in between finishing up some of the production work on the show and the 12 o'clock tip-off. I did it. I'm sorry I did, because, of course, disaster struck. But disaster apparently struck most people's picks, because they pick like normal people and they don't do crazy things like picking 116 upsets or 215 upsets, even though, sometimes they happen, and I think this was the second 116 in history, and wasn't the last one only in the last 5 years or so? By the way, New Jersey coming through on that one. This is going to be a sports talk show. Hey, how you doing, everybody? Sports Talk 95. I put on the radio voice for that one. New Jersey coming up big in the tournament. The 116 upset was against Fairleigh Dickinson University. I saw FDU up on the screen, and I figured it must be some other FDU I don't know about. It can't possibly be little old Fairleigh Dickinson University from New Jersey. And then, of course, the 215 upset was Princeton. So how about that, New Jersey? One northern New Jersey, one southern New Jersey. So, a little bit of balance there. That's nice. And Princeton continues on, won its second game against Missouri, Mizzou, as they like to be called, I guess, in this context. And everybody's favorite aspect of the game was, of course, the fact that I was wondering, what do people do? I know certain people who like to fill out their brackets and also have no information about how to make their picks, and like to do it either by their favorite colors. Which team colors do I prefer? And that's as good a basis as any, really, in this game. And then others I know who try to, they love especially the obscure teams' mascots. And they like to match up the mascots and see which mascot, if it were real in the world, would defeat the other one in battle, I suppose. And of course, so it set up this fantastic matchup of the Missouri Tigers, Mizzou and their Tigers versus, of course, the Princeton Tigers. And I was wondering what people would do with that. Not really sure. Maybe they went with the fact that Princeton's colors are orange and black made more sense for Tigers, supposedly. I don't know. Anyway, they won. That was the big upset of the weekend, and I don't know what else. Nothing else. Okay. By the way, I don't know if you care about this quite as much, but I woke up to, well, that's a lie. I went to sleep to headlines that said, oh, this could be the week that Trump gets indicted, arrested. None of the headlines said fall down the stairs and bump his head, anything like that, but you can always hope. And, well, so we'll wait and see. It's not happened yet. I don't think. Greg Dworkin's here, and he hasn't broken in to say, nah, Trump's indicted. He's been arrested. He's in Guantanamo. So we'll give him the chance to do that now in case that's happening. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Hey, listen, first time, long time. I'm a first-time caller, but a long-time listener, and I just want you to know there's a little university you probably never heard of in New Jersey here. It's called FU, and FU always wins, okay? You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, well,
right? I got your bracket right here, and it's been great, and it's about time we actually went there.
Yeah, well, they've been having to live with FDU for a long time. But anyway, it was a big, exciting weekend. I'm sorry they lost, but they were in it to the end, and yada yada. And by the way, of course, there is a game and a bracket that matters. It is the UConn women's team. I know that you follow that a lot more closely.
Yeah, a lot of
everything's
injuries
going
this year,
okay,
but they're playing pretty well. So
all right.
It's going to be very, very hard to dethrone South Carolina, who's just wonderful. But
all right.
Any given Sunday,
try. Right, even if it's not Sunday.
On the gridiron, any one of these college football, basketball, baseball teams can win.
Yes, that's right. Because
I wanted to call in and tell you that.
Oh, it's important to know. Basketball, I think, especially kind of exciting for that reason. That's the truth, and that's how Princeton has become a powerhouse from out of nowhere. From out of nowhere, Cinderella story. In the first 5 minutes of one of these games, anybody could be leading.
I'm old enough to remember when Gonzaga remembered and learned how to play basketball, and all of a sudden, they keep winning.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. Never heard of them. It's kind of fun, and yeah, that's the way to get introduced also to weird mascots that you didn't know existed, or different names for animals. What's a Saluki exactly? I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, it's a fun time, and in the first 5 minutes of those games, anybody could be winning, and
what really matters is the last 5 minutes of these games. That's the thing.
Yes.
You can skip everything else and just look at the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just really fun.
Although I always thought, it struck me always that Princeton's approach to the game was, because anybody could be winning in the first 5 minutes, if it happens to be you, don't shoot.
Slow it down.
Just hold the ball and they invented the shot clock because Princeton, sent the game.
They've been doing that since Bill Bradley.
Yeah, it's always kind of been their strategy, and it's kind of smart and fun, and also it's cool to watch them shoot threes because they use protractors and they never miss. It's really incredible. You see these guys calculating their shots in ways nobody else does.
Right. They got guys on the team named Da Vinci and Michelangelo. It's amazing.
And they're ninjas and they're turtles and the whole thing.
So let's talk about what's going on these days in the world, particularly in the American world.
Yeah. Okay.
And my pundit roundup today was titled "Don't Expect an Indictment Tuesday and Don't Believe Anything Trump Says."
Yeah, have it Monday.
So there's a whole story behind all of this, of course.
All right.
And why don't we start with Judd Legum, who has a Substack.
Yes.
Well, it's not really Substack. It is Substack.
Is it?
Actually. It's called Popular Information.
The Legume Report.
The Legume Report, right? The Vegetable Report. And we're talking about why Stormy Daniels matters.
Oh, this could
now,
get
this is
racy.
important because, as we all know,
Not racist.
Circle
Racy.
back to it. Trump said he's going to be arrested Tuesday over the Stormy Daniels affair.
Awesome.
Which isn't going to happen.
Not that one.
And so that's part of the reason why I had the title as it is. We don't know Trump will be indicted, I wrote. We don't know it's going to be Tuesday. We don't know for what. But sure, go ahead and speculate with confidence about what it all means. That's in capital letters.
All right, excellent.
But be sure to note who you're talking about, because reporters aren't the same thing as GOP primary voters, and they're not the same thing as general election voters, and they're not the same thing as other prosecutors. So if you say it is or isn't meaningful, who are you talking about? For whom do you mean? For whom does the bell toll? So, these are all important existential questions. And let's go back to Judd, because he kind of points out that whereas people are saying ridiculously so, like David Axelrod, well, this is such a weak case, I only wish the other ones would come first, as if one is dependent upon the other, as if it's in a vacuum and only one is allowed to happen.
Yeah,
as if any of that matters.
You should be excited about the fact that he could be facing charges in multiple forums, states, federal, one state.
Well, Trump in
state.
capital letters said, I'm going to be arrested and you all should protest because this is all being directed by George Soros and the Democratic Party. So he gets to work in a little anti-Semitism in there as well.
Sure.
But as Judd wrote, Trump's comments came after widespread reports that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg was closing in on an indictment.
Alvin.
Right, connected to Trump's $130,000 hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, a former adult film star who says she had an affair with Trump. Later, a Trump spokesman clarified that Trump had no direct knowledge of the timing of any arrest. He just wanted to make a lot of noise.
Huh.
So the strategy, it appears, is to drown out any discussion of his actual conduct.
Sure.
By skipping right to the outrage about his arrest, even though he hasn't been arrested, even though he hasn't been charged. This approach involves convincing the public his actions were unimportant and therefore any charges are politically motivated.
I see.
And that's why he wrote this thing, Why Stormy Daniels Matters.
Oh, let's find out.
On the left, David Axelrod, who served as Barack Obama's chief strategist, characterized the money payments to Daniels as least meaningful of all allegations against Trump. Charging Trump for something so insignificant would allow Trump to characterize all future charges as politically motivated. Axelrod is actually an idiot. It's amazing to me how
yes.
analysis has become.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in those other cases. None of that's true. He's going to claim it, but he was going to claim it anyway. And if Alvin Bragg hadn't acted at all, he'd still claim it. So the idea that, Bragg allowed this to happen, whereas it was never going to happen otherwise, is stupid. Anyway, while McCarthy and Axelrod are quick to dismiss Trump, that's Kevin McCarthy, quick to dismiss Trump's conduct, his payment to silence Daniels was an effort to subvert the democratic process.
Yes.
And this is a review of what actually happened, which, people forget.
Yeah, what did
Stormy
happen?
Daniels met Trump in 2006.
That's quite a ways away.
It was a celebrity golf tournament.
Yeah.
Daniels says Trump invited her to his hotel room and said he could secure her a spot on his reality show, The Apprentice. He didn't say in return for what. It doesn't say what she was thinking, but duh. She alleges that they then had a sexual encounter, which Trump denies.
Oh.
Now,
I didn't know that.
Afterwards, Daniels was invited to other events, including the 2007 launch of Trump Vodka.
Glug, glug, glug.
Then Daniels sought to sell the story about her alleged relationship with Trump.
Sure.
Starting in 2011.
Oh, well, that's
He's become a little more famous because he
Not
started
necessarily
the
politically
thing
motivated.
about Obama.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and she was trying to shop the story.
Yes.
Nobody wanted it.
As one does. Oh, really?
She gave Life and Style, a magazine called Life and Style, an extensive interview in exchange for $15,000, and that would have been the end of it. But when Life and Style contacted the Trump Organization for comment, Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, threatened to sue.
Oh, yeah, that's what he does.
So Life and Style killed the story and didn't pay Daniels.
Oh, that's not nice.
Okay. Daniels tried to shop the story again in 2016. This time, Trump emerged as a Republican nominee. She still couldn't do it. Nobody wanted it. And then in October of 2016, very significant timing there.
Yes.
10 years later, Access Hollywood happens. All of a sudden, people are interested.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That's what changed.
I see.
So Dylan Howard, who was then editor of the National Enquirer, reached out to Daniels' agent, Judd Legum writes, and asked her to make another proposal for Daniels' story. Mm-hmm. But what Dylan Howard, the then editor of the National Enquirer, didn't know is that David Pecker, the publisher of the National Enquirer,
you didn't know this? Okay.
had already reached a secret agreement at the outset of Trump's presidential campaign to work together for catch and kill negative stories, where you pay somebody and then you don't publish it, and that way nobody else does it because you had exclusive rights. You paid them. They can't talk about it. You can't talk about it or won't. And so it's cool. Nobody finds out. The thing is, Howard was going to pay Daniels $120,000 for the story, but David Pecker, the publisher, had just paid Karen McDougal $150,000.
Oh, yes.
And so in a similar scheme, and he didn't want to pay Daniels. He didn't want to keep paying people for these things. He had already spent some money on it. He didn't have infinite funds. And so he said, no, I'm not going to pay her.
All right. That would have been fun to just leave it at that.
This editor, who had originally arranged for this story with Stormy Daniels, told Michael Cohen, he'd need to take care of it himself because we at National Enquirer don't have the money.
Tired of paying for your cover-ups.
Right?
Yeah.
So, again, keep in mind.
Why were they ever paying?
It's October 2016. Michael Cohen is trying to kill this story. He thought he could do it through National Enquirer, who initially said yeah, and then they said no. But now he's in a bind, Michael Cohen and the Trump organization and the Trump campaign and Donald Trump indirectly.
Yeah.
Because not only does this story exist, and not only is it of interest after the Access Hollywood tape,
yes,
but Stormy Daniels has even more information because now she can not just talk about the 10-year-ago affair, she can also talk about the fact that they tried to kill it.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's not
and that
the
really
crime,
makes
it's the cover-up. Once
so
again.
Michael Cohen said, no, we really have to kill this thing. So he arranges a $130,000 deal to purchase Daniel's silence, and that's what this payment is, and that's what Alvin Bragg is investigating.
Yeah.
Which, when you put it in that context, actually sounds worse than what you probably remembered about it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, Axelrod is thinking about it, like, oh, come on, it's a sex scandal, who cares? But it's a lot more than that, and, you know, he's not a terribly nuanced guy when he doesn't need to be. If he needs nuance to dig his way out of a hole, he's a nuanced guy. But
right. So after consulting with Trump, Cohen withdrew $131,000 from a home equity line of credit and transferred it to a recently formed shell company, Essential Consultants. The shell company transfers $130,000 to Davidson on October 27th. That's the agent for Daniels.
Okay.
And then there's a great deal of effort to obscure Trump's involvement with the payment.
Yeah.
And in the non-disclosure agreement itself, Trump is referred to by a pseudonym, David Dennison.
Right, yeah, I remember that now.
And a separate side agreement, it identifies David Dennison as Trump. And a few days after that, Trump wins the presidency.
All right. By the way, I was curious about the National Enquirer role there where they say, well, you know, we're not going to pay for two of them. Like, were they ever actually paying? I would have thought that the deal was probably, well, we'll lay out the cash, but then Trump has to reimburse us. But then maybe that's the answer. Trump doesn't reimburse people.
No, Trump doesn't reimburse people. Pecker was paying for this, and he knew he was going to pay for this. He just wanted Trump elected.
I guess.
He figured it was a good investment.
But only worth one of these things. I can't do two, not $250,000.
So the question on the table is any of that actually illegal?
Okay.
Not by federal law, but by New York state law.
Oh, well,
and apparently the deal there is that it's a misdemeanor to do stuff like this unless hiding of the hush money was in furtherance of a second crime. And what was that second crime? And that's where the speculation about, well, the second crime had to do vaguely with finance for the campaign, and that's iffy, and that's why David Axelrod and other people are saying, well, maybe Bragg doesn't have much of a case. But they don't know. See, that's the point. They don't know what Bragg has, and they don't know what charges Bragg is going to bring.
And you are talking about Donald Trump and New York authorities. There's probably several crimes, many of which we don't know about.
That's right. And one of them might be.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you heard.
I don't know either.
But one of the reasons it's not likely that Trump is going to be indicted on Tuesday is the grand jury is still meeting and hearing from witnesses today, Monday.
All right.
And one of the witnesses that had previously testified is Michael Cohen.
Yes, that I do know.
And one of the witnesses that's supposed to show up today is a rebuttal witness that says Michael Cohen's a liar.
Well,
and that's a lawyer that worked for Donald Trump at the time that Michael Cohen was indicted for all of this and convicted and spent time in jail for all of this. I mean, it really happened. So legally, this isn't just speculation. This hush money stuff actually happened.
Yes.
Somebody went to jail for it.
Right, him.
So this lawyer who was representing Trump against Michael Cohen is going to testify to the grand jury. Basically, you can't believe anything Michael Cohen says. And then Michael Cohen gets to come back in and rebut that.
Yes, you can.
Well, that's going to take a couple of days, and that's one of the reasons why it's not likely that he's going to be indicted tomorrow.
Okay. In New York.
In New York.
Anyway.
But,
yes.
And again, it would be irresponsible not to speculate since everybody else is.
Right.
Let me just give you a for instance.
All right.
Right? For instance, what if the second crime is this other lawyer threatening Michael Cohen and trying to obstruct justice?
That'd be cool too.
That would be a felony.
All right.
And if that's the case that Bragg is making, all of a sudden it's not so weak and wishy-washy.
I guess, right? I'm trying to think about how. All right. Well, I'm open to it.
Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Maybe there's evidence. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there's tapes. Michael Cohen taped stuff.
That's true. Also.
But like, if that's the case, maybe it's not so. All I'm saying is, why don't you wait and see what Bragg has before you start declaring that there's nothing there, David Axelrod?
Oh, yeah. So I'm happily say that to Axelrod. I will remind everybody that Bragg backed off of this whole thing at one point out of an abundance of caution, and everybody was furious.
He backed off of something different.
Okay. But,
right. He backed off on
I don't remember
whether or not Trump was doing tax evasion stuff with the business.
Okay, right. What I mean to say here is,
you got to remember,
he's a guy who backs off if he
six
doesn't have
different investigations into Trump going
true,
on,
too.
and Alvin Bragg was involved in at least two of them.
Yes. And what I meant to say is that he's a cautious enough person that, you know, when he had something that there was popular demand for an indictment, but he didn't have the goods.
He didn't run for it.
Yeah.
In fact, people got so mad they wrote a book about it and accused him of all sorts of stuff. I mean, You're right. He's a cautious guy, and so the idea that this cautious guy is going ahead with this makes you think there might be something there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could chalk it up to, well, now
so
he
David
feels bad about
all
not
you other
doing
folks,
it the first
Kevin
time.
McCarthy, why don't you wait and see what Bragg has? But it's only going to be a little while.
Yes. The answer to that is pundits are not in the business of waiting and seeing. If they wait and see, then everybody knows the answer, and they're not geniuses.
Yeah, exactly right.
So
I just thought that we'd go through this a little history because it puts into perspective a little bit about what's going on. But that's only part of it. In other words, okay, so that's what Bragg has. Mm-hmm. But then there's what Fani Willis has down in Georgia. And there's at least 3 different tapes of Trump putting pressure to cheat.
That does sound like a great case.
Which speculation in the AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and others says, you know what, Fani Willis actually has a strong enough case for RICO charges and or conspiracy. Now, there's nothing that says that just because Alvin Bragg brings charges, that Fani Willis's charges wouldn't, because, quote, they're stronger, end quote, according to people like David Axelrod.
Yeah.
If that actually happened, are we saying that nobody's going to pay attention because Alvin Bragg went first?
I mean,
is that really the contention?
Because
this ruins everything. Because why? As soon as Fani Willis has what she has, if it's strong enough, that is what everybody's going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Because after all, if Trump is indicted and he is charged, then it has to go to court. He has his day in court. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty and all of that.
Not him. He's
law.
guilty.
And so it's going to take a while, is my point.
Yes.
And it's not going to be finished and wrapped up and guilty or innocent decided before Fani Willis's case comes.
Yeah, I think that's maybe at the heart of what Axelrod is talking about. Like, what if he gets indicted, but he escapes the charge? He beats the rap.
4 years from now.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It will take a long time.
It'll take a long time. And by the way,
I think
the other one who has a really, really super strong case is Jack Smith. And he's got 2 cases, like Alvin Bragg. He's got 2 cases he's working on. And one of them is the Mar-a-Lago documents, for which Trump lawyer Evan Corcoran has lost attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
Because of the now well-known to everybody crime fraud exception.
Yeah, we all learned, right?
And if that's the case, and if Beryl Howell, the judge in D.C., says that that's so, he must have a strong case. Otherwise, Evan Corcoran would lose attorney-client privilege with the former president of the United States.
Yeah, that would be you have to have done something pretty incredibly wrong.
So you probably did commit a crime. Yeah, it has to be proven he's innocent until proven guilty. But the judge was convinced. And it is enough Donald here. Trump. Right? And so are you telling me, David Axelrod, that when Jack Smith brings his case, that all of a sudden everybody's going to say, no, you can't really do that because Alvin Bragg?
Yes.
I mean, the whole idea is just so ridiculous to begin with. And then Jack Smith has his January 6th stuff.
Yeah, he does have 2 investigations going.
Right. So he's got 2 investigations. Fannie Willis has 1.
A lot of crime with this guy.
And Alvin Bragg has 2 because he's also looking at the civil aspects of the Trump organization. So that's 5. Right. And then there's a 6th. And we'll talk about the 6th one after the break.
Hey,
there's other stuff going on, too.
Cool. There's no end to this because he's a very criminal guy.
Because Alvin Bragg is going to do something.
Well, it's a big race, and maybe they could all indict at once.
I'm just pointing out it's ridiculous and it gets me angry.
Right. Arrest David Axelrod, I say. I have no reason, but
lock them all up.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or 2 would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm reliably informed Greg doesn't want to talk about the part of the story where it's alleged that Trump is spanked with a rolled-up magazine by Stormy Daniels with a picture of Ivanka on the cover. So we're not going to go there, he said. So there's that's where we're not going.
So I suppose it's legitimate.
That's true, right? Family things can be a big theme, I understand, in her industry. It's a weird little bit of I don't know what that interests people, so we'll skip it for now.
The other thing that Judd Lagoon pointed out, which I think is worthwhile mentioning, because the Trump people keep mentioning it,
okay,
is the idea that you shouldn't pay any attention to the Stormy Daniels stuff because Trump is a victim of an extortion plot by Stormy Daniels.
Oh.
But having gone over the whole story, it's clear that that's not the case at all.
No. I mean, and if you're extorting
She wasn't asking
Donald
money
Trump
from Trump to not talk about this. Trump was offering them money, trying to bribe her into not talking about this.
Yeah. She was trying to get paid
She
to tell
didn't come to him. She was trying to get it published.
And if you're trying to if you're really extorting Donald Trump and he's purported to be a billionaire, $130,000 isn't the extortion number. Right. Should be $1 billion or whatever.
Yeah. Or the complete rights to Trump vodka or something worthwhile,
Your entire stockpile of Trump water. Yeah.
All of them now at once.
All right. Well, yeah, it's not unlikely.
this is in the Bulwark actually today.
Oh.
The Trump
Brand
investigation
new.
you probably haven't heard about.
Oh.
So let me just
Let's
go
see.
through this. This is Joyce Vance writing in her own Substack before we get there. The question at the top of our minds this week is whether the chickens will finally come home to roost. So, in federal court, a special counsel is investigating his role in election interference and the obstruction of the official proceedings of Congress. So that's one of the Jack Smiths. And then the same special counsel is investigating evidence that he took concealed and perhaps copied classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. So that's 2. In Georgia, Trump is under investigation for election fraud.
Yes.
That's 3. While the charges in New York are expected to involve false business records created to conceal Trump's payment of hush money to Stormy Daniels.
Okay.
So that's the Stormy Daniels. That's 4. But there's also the possibility of more criminal charges in New York over financial crimes committed before he became president. That's 5, and that's the one that Bragg didn't want to go forward on at the time because he said it wasn't ripe.
Wow. May have ripened.
May have
But
ripened.
that would be 5. Did you
Right.
say 5? 5.
Now there's 6.
6.
The Trump investigation you probably haven't heard about. All right.
What is it?
This one involves the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission. You know about it because I think you've covered it on the show.
Oh, all right. I knew it.
And it's how he launched Truth Social and whether there's anything fraudulent associated with that.
Well, I knew the story of how he did. I don't know if I knew that it was under investigation.
The matter involves the so-called
But it should
blank
be.
check company called Digital World Acquisition.
Yes.
Sounds like a wrestling company.
Right. It does.
Blank check companies have no established business plan, according to the Bulwark here,
Neither do
but
I.
actually gather funds and sell
I
shares to
don't do
investors with the intention of merging with or acquiring other companies in the future.
Right.
So the investors have no idea what they're going to be investing in.
I have no idea what I'm going to be broadcasting. It's a little
So-
like this show.
Yeah. So under SEC rules, after an initial public offering or an IPO, a blank check company's funds have to be deposited in escrow prior to a transaction and held there until shareholders officially approve a merger.
All right.
So as of 2020, a particular form of blank check companies, which are known as special purpose acquisition companies or SPACs,
Yes. Right.
right? They should be called SCAMs, capital letters,
We got to come up with the right acronym for it.
right? Because they're all scams.
Yeah.
But made up 50% of the market for IPOs. 50% of the market.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
That was one of those. If there's so many SPACs, this is like ripe for another Big Short kind of thing here.
Yeah.
The figure represents a huge spike prompted by the SEC's temporary inability to approve traditional IPOs due to COVID pandemic.
Huh.
Trump took advantage of it to launch Truth Social.
I had no idea there was a COVID angle.
So in April
No wonder he hates
2021, Trump's
vaccines.
representatives had a video conference with Patrick Orlando, Digital World's chief executive, and a month later, Digital World advised the federal government that it had not identified or had discussions with any potential merger targets.
Uh-huh.
And then that was in
lie.
April, but in October, Trump Media and Technology Group merged with Digital World, which provided $293 million in funding it raised in its IPO from big investors who pitched in as much as $30 million apiece. Now, that drew the attention of the SEC, which opened an investigation out of concern that Trump and Digital World might have secretly planned the merger before going public and didn't disclose it, and therefore
Yeah,
the
almost certainly.
rules about how you run these things were violated.
Okay.
Now, according to reporting by the New York Times, the average time for public blank check companies to find a target to merge with and complete a deal is 17 months. And Digital World did it a month after going public.
Oh, very quick. Yes.
Now, currently, the SEC probe has delayed the Trump Media Digital World merger indefinitely, so it never did merge.
Oh, okay.
That's one of the reasons why Truth Social, I guess, is in trouble in terms of money.
Yeah, maybe. All right, I see. Could be the problem.
In June 2022, it was revealed that a federal grand jury, which issued subpoenas to the Digital World board members, is also involved. Last week, The Guardian reported that federal prosecutors have expanded their criminal investigation to examine 2 loans totaling $8 million that were wired to Trump Media through the Caribbean from entities connected to an ally of Russian Federation President Vladimir Putin.
Oh, hey, Kevin McCarthy. Guess what?
You know, the first payment Kevin McCarthy should really check with Dana Rohrabacher before he starts defending Donald Trump.
But at one time he knew. But
at one time he knew, but Rohrabacher probably still knows. The first payment of $2 million came in December 21. That's because Rohrabacher was under the pay of Vladimir Putin, according to Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
Around the same time the SEC opened its initial investigation, Orlando, who's a licensed SEC broker, reportedly sourced the payment from Paxum Bank, registered in the tiny Caribbean island of Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic. A promissory note identified another entity, ES Family Trust, as the lender. ES Family Trust sent Trump Media another $6 million. A trustee of ES Family Trust, Angel Pacheco, is reportedly also a director of Paxum Bank, which has a history of providing banking services for the sex worker industry, purportedly putting it at a higher risk of engaging in money laundering. Paxum Bank is also partly owned by Anton Postilnikov, an apparent relation of Putin ally Alexander Smirnov, who in turn heads the maritime company Rosmoport, which is controlled by the Russian Federation.
Okay. Yikes.
So, Will Wilkerson, a former Trump media executive fired from his post, reportedly filed a whistleblower complaint with the SEC alleging that the Trump media digital world merger was rife with fraudulent misrepresentations. Okay, it's detailed, glaze over, whatever. The point is, there's yet another different thing going on here. Again, so the idea that Alvin Bragg somehow is going to put a stop to these 5 other investigations is absurd. They're all independent. They're all different. They're all going to have their own timing. Trump's in trouble.
Comes out victorious in a case, so obviously he's never going to be in court again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even
that's
if
we say about
it
Donald
turns
Trump.
out that Alvin Bragg brings charges, and even if it turns out that eventually Trump beats them, still got nothing to do with the other 5 cases.
Yeah.
And it doesn't influence the other 5 cases.
It's a foolish thing to say, and especially, Axelrod knows it. And if you're an elected prosecutor, like the case down in Georgia, you're not gonna care what happens in New York all that much. If you feel like, well, 1, I have a good case, 2, I have a responsibility, 3, I have to run for re-election, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, you'd think Axelrod would have, he said what he said. He needed to say something in the morning in order to get on TV, so he did it. Okay. It was foolish.
So, as George Takei says, look, never mind Stormy Daniels. Trump could collude with the Russians to release hacked emails, extort a foreign ally to help him win an election, plot to overturn an election, incite a violent insurrection, defraud his followers out of millions by promoting election conspiracies, steal top-secret government documents, strong-arm state officials to throw the election his way, blatantly obstruct the FBI as it tries to investigate his actions and recover classified materials, and the GOP would still call it a political witch hunt.
Yes.
Because Trump did all of those things.
And is a witch. So, I guess that's true. And the fact that there would be Democratic operatives saying, you only get 1 shot at this guy who's done 18 crimes.
Right, exactly. So, just
this week. Right.
Weird.
Okay, bad analysis, good stories. And a good analysis by you of the bad analysis from Axelrod.
So, again, I think that's important. Now, there's other things going on in the world. Here I saw an interesting thing on Twitter about France.
Well, how are they doing?
Things, actually, which
they
I think
have
are worth covering.
Things. That's a big weekend for them. 2 things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the one thing was that one of my friends, who's German, wrote, it's really weird how, nobody in Germany is paying any attention at all as to what's going on in France.
Oh, well, I mean...
we follow the minutiae of everything that happens in the United States, and France is on fire. Nobody's paying attention.
Well, the French frequently light themselves on fire. Yeah.
That's what the British say.
It's flambé. It's just France flambé. What are you talking about?
As long as Notre Dame is not burning, nobody cares. So, This is Nicholas Colin writing on Twitter. Okay, this is going too far. Professor Scott Galloway writes, retirement age, Germany 65.6, Italy 67, US 67, most of the EU 65 plus, France 62.
Oui.
Initially, that would make you outraged. Why is France protesting? They have it so good. And Nicholas Collins says, look, here's a short thread about understanding this. 62 years is not the age at which everybody retires in France.
Okay,
It's
right,
the
sure.
minimal age to retire with full pension, provided you've contributed enough quarters, meaning 50% of your gross average salary over the entirety of your career.
Yeah, all right.
That's what you get.
It's a pretty normal
Cases of less than you
rule.
were earning each month before retiring. I mean, in the U.S., you can retire at 62 and ask for Social Security. You just don't get the full amount.
Yeah. I could retire now and not get anything.
Yeah, exactly. To receive the full pension at 62,
I'm retiring.
you
Yes.
need to have contributed enough quarters being employed. That's 42 years in total, which means having started working age 20 and having 0 lapses in employment.
Mm-hmm. Which
And
is,
that
as a
mostly
French
concerns
person, is
blue-collar
difficult.
jobs and low-skilled clerical jobs. And there are professions like law enforcement
Waiter.
that you essentially get to retire at 55.
Oh. They should let the waiters go at 55. But okay.
Missing quarters will result in a steep
cool.
discount applied to the
I
owed
guess.
amount. In practice cases, you'll get 40% instead
Sorry.
of 50% of your gross average salary if you're employed 38 years instead of 42.
Owed
So in
amount.
other words, it doesn't apply to everybody across the board, and you get penalized if you retire early, just like in the United States.
Yeah,
Ways
all right.
to avoid the
So it's
discount
normal.
are buying missing quarters, working a bit longer, waiting until age 67. Yes, that same age when supposedly everybody else retires.
Mm-hmm.
So France isn't that exceptional.
Right. Okay. That seems reasonable enough.
Right?
And you
So
I
then
like
he
to
asks
buy
the next
the
question.
owed quarters.
So if that's the
Huh.
case, and if basically it's the same everywhere, why are the French angry?
Oh. Well, that is a good question.
Well, the current state of political debate in France is due to, 1, people's fear of not being able to sustain a full career by age 62 to 67.
Okay.
2, worries that their standard of living once retired is going to erode.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, everybody thinks that Macron is absolutely insufferable and they hate him.
Well, maybe that's true.
So then he goes ahead and he pushes this thing through without a vote. And that was the spark that led to the fire. So I thought that was an interesting analysis you don't usually read about here.
It is, especially as it does lay out the fact that, the French retirement rules, like the fact that the age is 62, that's lower, but it's a fairly straightforward, well, not straightforward, but a normal thing. It's got all the same caveats and rules that basically makes their retirement equivalent to anybody else's. And, if they were going to change that, then they have something to complain about. Plus, they have Macron, I guess. So,
Right.
I guess that bothers them. Seems fine to me, though. But he's not my
Let's see.
president. All right. Well, that was interesting, and I liked he threw in something about you can pay the owed amount, and I was like, that sounds very French. Owed amount. That's my new
So,
perfume.
I mean, this is just
owed
off the
amount.
internet from the Social Security Administration.
Okay.
How soon after I turn 62 can I collect Social Security? At any point from age 62 up until age 70.
Anytime you want. Just
Your
less.
benefit will be higher the longer you delay your start date. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
The adjustment is usually permanent. It sets the base for the benefits you get for the rest of your life. And then at 70, you sort of have to take it.
All right.
That's the way it works.
Okay. I think. I don't know. We'll see if it's the same way when I get there, but or if it's there at all, if we don't have the Republicans wreck it somehow. But okay, so I don't know. The French, they kind of protest almost anything, but they do it very effectively. They have all the tools for protest. They very frequently get their way when workers protest. And so really, why wouldn't you try? In France,
Yeah.
they often win.
Yeah, they often do.
Plus, they have hot dog grills on rail cars somehow. I saw that. So it's like a famous picture of a French protest. They're marching in the street, and they have a grill to feed the marchers. They're grilling hot dogs and hamburgers, I guess. Sausages, I'm sure they would say. And the grill has wheels, and it fits in the streetcar rails. And it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Right. So next on Kagro in the morning.
Some people have seen this photo.
Doesn't
Yes.
that sound official somehow?
Yes.
It's not. Do not try this at home.
All right.
So Kevin McCarthy says, here we go again, an outrageous abuse of power by a radical DA who lets violent criminals walk. He's talking about Alvin Bragg,
Oh, yeah.
who suggested that everybody with misdemeanors like jumping subway turnstiles doesn't need to automatically go to jail right away. Who lets violent criminals walk as he pursues political vengeance against President Trump. I'm directing relevant committees to immediately investigate if federal funds are being used to subvert our democracy.
I thought
interfering in elections
out
with
of the way.
politically motivated prosecutions. Look, subverting our democracy with politically motivated investigations is what Republicans do in the House.
Yeah. That's wow. Well, it sounds like the sort of thing he'd be pushed into by the Freedom Caucus and Murdery Trader Green, like to do a federal investigation.
So he's in a box, and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are in fact pushing her to do that. Ruth Ben-Gott,
it must be.
who is a expert on fascism, says students of propaganda note the continuing effort to turn pro-democratic forces into tyrants. Goes with depicting January 6 criminals as martyrs and patriots, all part of the massive GOP cover-up operation of its role in Trump's attempt to overthrow the government. So obviously, in this way of thinking, which I totally get, the most important of the charges against Trump is Jack Smith's January 6 stuff.
Yeah, I would. Okay.
Sure. The biggest slam dunk case they're going to win is the Mar-a-Lago stuff, because you can't take documents and then try to cover it up. That's the Evan Corcoran crime fraud exception that the judge said, yes, probably a crime here.
And Jack Smith has both of those.
Jack Smith has both of those. The Fani Willis one sounds really bad.
It does.
Like RICO stuff is not a good thing you should be doing. Plus, they have not videotapes, but audio tapes.
Yeah.
And audio tapes, when you have one, you could sort of, he got carried away. When you have two,
he got carried
you can
away
make
again.
a case, as they like to say. When you have three, it's RICO.
Right. Well, you swing and you miss the ball once, it could happen to anybody. Right. Twice, well, you're not doing so great. 3, I'm sorry, you have to leave.
And then there's whatever Bragg has.
Yeah.
And so this comes, interestingly enough, at a time where the Republican primary race for the nominee to be president of these here United States has come down to a 2-person race between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Some polls say they're sort of tied. Other polls say Trump's ahead. This is from Nate Cohen from the 17th a couple days ago. I don't think we got to it on the show. DeSantis on defense shows signs of slipping in polls. For now, the Florida governor isn't firing back at Trump. Keep that in mind. This was before the Alvin Bragg stuff all broke.
Okay.
So it's been a tough few months for DeSantis. Donald Trump and his allies have blasted him as Meatball Ron DeSanctimonious, a groomer. Now he's getting criticism for calling Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That we covered pretty extensively, and he got slammed for that. Is all of this making a difference in the polls? Yes. Yes, it is. In surveys taken since the Trump offensive began 2 months ago, DeSantis, the Florida governor, has steadily lost ground against Trump, whose own numbers have increased. And while it can be hard to track who's up and who's down, the best thing to do is take the same pollster and look at it over time. And when you do that, clearly Trump has gained and DeSantis has lost before all of this. Now this comes around, and Trump is already blasting DeSantis for not defending Trump. In other words, the whole concept of having gotten the word that Trump might be indicted makes Trump turn around to the Republican Party as a whole, his voters in particular, but especially the candidates running against him, and say, basically, guys, you're obligated to defend me. Now, go ahead.
What a thought.
I expect you to do this. Do it. And if you don't, I'm going to blast you for it. And that's what he's doing with DeSantis. DeSantis is in a box. What is DeSantis supposed to do? If you defend Trump, then you say, okay, well, Trump really should be the nominee. And if you don't defend Trump, then you lose MAGA. And how do you win the Republican primary without MAGA? And so DeSantis was already dropping in the polls. And now you look at this and say, how is this guy supposed to win? He already doesn't know how to kiss babies. And now he doesn't know how to manage an indictment.
Yeah.
And not against him.
What a thing. That's an amazing, I must say, an amazing play by Trump to get it to where, you're running in a competitive primary and you're hurting your opponents with the attack that they're not defending you when you're about to be indicted. And it's working. That's incredible.
And that clearly to me is why he made the announcement on Truth Social about I'm going to be indicted. It was to get DeSantis. It wasn't to start another January 6th.
All right.
And that's why I'm not especially worried that, especially in New York, people are going to show up and start at January 6th.
No. Yeah, that doesn't seem
Proud
likely.
Boys in New York just got beaten up for trying to interrupt the drag queen hour.
Yeah, that was terrific news to read. So yeah, they're not operating at full strength in New York. They're not going to be able to show up and disrupt things there.
There's a Democratic governor. There's the NYPD, which really doesn't like their town getting messed up, even if they do support Trump. And basically Trump doesn't control the National Guard and can tell them to stand down. It's not the same thing. He's not going to be indicted on Tuesday, and Tuesday isn't going to be another January 6th. What is going to happen is Trump is using this in order to slam the brakes on DeSantis, and it'll probably work. That's fine, because I hate DeSantis.
Sure.
And I don't fear Trump.
I love Meatball Ron. That's a good one. I mean, a little bit of pot kettle problem, but it's funny. And that's what he does best, is make people who actually, have every reason to
I still think
dump
Tiny
on
D
him.
is much better.
Tiny D. That's a new one. I don't think I heard that one.
Oh, yeah.
I thought Meatball Ron is.
It just invokes a lot of different things,
funny.
not just Ron DeSantis' height.
What? All right. Yeah. Well, that's true. I hadn't heard that one. I hadn't had a chance to consider that yet. But it ain't good if you're the target of it. No, I think I'd rather be almost anything than. Okay.
All right. Now, some things to note between now and the end of the hour, which is coming up. Philip Bump writes, the things that made January 6th dangerous were a call to action and a time and place for that action to take place. Mm-hmm. It's not just that Trump is again demanding a response. It's that he's telling people when.
Okay.
Right. Which is to say, I'm going to be indicted Tuesday. Show up Tuesday. Protest Tuesday.
Yeah. We'll be wild.
But
it's too short notice.
It's too short notice, and things have changed.
And
everybody already knows that not only do you not control the army, but these things you tend to get arrested and prosecuted for, and then get sent to jail.
Yes, that's true too. There's 900 people arrested last time you did.
Been there, done that. I can't do it. I'm already in jail.
Right, that's true. A lot of people still waiting their trial and are captive and can't show up. As you mentioned, over the weekend when the Proud Boys showed up in New York, they got beaten up, and then they cried to the media about it. I didn't come here to get my I didn't come here to get my ass kicked. The crap beaten out of me.
I came here to help.
Yeah, right. Well, he came to beat the crap out of other people, and as it turns out, he lost the fight. Now he's crying in the media about it, which is very Trump somehow. But,
yeah.
Good.
This is from NBC News. Manhattan DA says attempts to intimidate the office won't be tolerated after Trump's call for protests. Alvin Bragg sought to assure staffers in a memo they'll be safe. Please know your safety is our top priority. Mm-hmm. We do not tolerate attempts to intimidate our office or threaten the rule of law in New York.
Well, that's nice.
I'm thinking of Humphrey Bogart telling the Nazis in Casablanca, there's parts of New York I would advise you not to try to invade.
Oh, okay. Well,
which is true.
Well, yes, on a number of levels.
Number of levels. All right, this one.
Yeah.
This is a whole tweet thread by Ryan J. Riley covering the Proud Boys trial.
Still going on. Yeah.
It uses the F word, but it's part of something that was said in court under oath. So I wonder.
My God! Wait a second. All right, I'm getting my horn ready. Oh, I have some other ones too. Yeah, go on.
You ready?
Yeah.
So Ryan J. Riley is listing top 10 January 6th defendant quotes.
Oh, gosh. All right.
So they're talking about what could have happened after it failed. And Rufio Panman in text says at 2:32 p.m., we truly believed in that. Some guys are in jail because they followed him. I'm disgusted that I had such loyalty to Trump and have lost everything for it.
Well, I like that.
Ready?
Yeah.
That guy.
All right. Well, yeah.
So they go on and on and on, and it's a whole thread about how they turned on Trump and got really mad at him when he gave up at the end of the day. So the point is, don't believe anything Trump says. Doesn't just apply to us. It applies to MAGA world, too.
Guess so.
You trusted him. You thought he was going to defend you.
You dummies.
But don't trust anything Trump says applies to MAGA world just like it applies to the rest of us, just like gravity does, or theory of relativity, or the rule of law. I'm just saying.
It's must be a frustrating experience for these guys, but no better person to be frustrated, no better people to be frustrated than these guys. Good. I'm glad. And I don't know. I don't know whether that's going to I wonder if he thinks that will make the jury sympathetic, or is he just like, I give up, I'm going to lose? I don't know. Or maybe it's a little bit of both. I'm going to lose, but don't sentence me to the max. I believed in it, and I'm going to say, I'm going to tell you all that he's a liar and I hate him. And maybe that'll let you find sympathy for me somehow.
Right.
Well, it's an exciting development and good to hear.
So the Dow Jones is up 338 points. So maybe the bank crisis is sort of being contained somewhat. UBS, Swiss bank, agrees to buy Credit Suisse, another Swiss bank, over the weekend, prodded by the Swiss, who are providing the money to do it.
Well, good. They're all taking care
Credit
of business
Suisse
at home.
has its own issues. Part of the problem with Silicon Valley Bank is that they just exposed the whole issue with all the other banks not being as solid as they appeared to be.
Okay.
Basically because of higher interest rates, but Credit Suisse had its own issues with multiple scandals over the last few years. That's why the Biden administration was concerned about contagion, and that's why they wanted to jump in and do stuff, which they did. Yes, they're open for after-the-fact criticism in terms of how they managed right up until the crisis. They didn't do enough regulation. Yes, they are open to what they did after the crisis, although they're actually handling it fairly well after the crisis. However, it's not quite over. There's still more to come. But so far, it looks like it's yet another example of Biden administration competence, which is really going to annoy the Republicans. Yeah. While Trump, on the other hand, is being indicted, and the entire Republican Party can't get their message out because they're too busy defending Trump. So there's lots of stories about how the Republican Party is really annoyed with Donald Trump because he's sucking up all the oxygen again. And we can't talk about all the good things we do, like the weaponization committee. And I forgot what else because, the list isn't very long.
Yeah, well, they were oxygen deprived early on, so okay, it never really developed, I guess. Well, what a wild weekend and what a wild strategy Trump has going on. This is working to everybody's benefit, I guess. That's good news.
Yeah, you'll have this show. I won't be on tomorrow, but I think on Wednesday I'll probably be able to say, see, look, he wasn't indicted. Yeah. And if he is, okay, I was wrong.
I'll be happy. All right. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. What an exciting roundup that is. All right, so I think we have the Trump freak out that he might be indicted / arrested / something. I think they were conflating the two stories to begin with, but it sounds like not only were they being conflated, there are the two options, arresting and indicting. But also that the excitement about either one of them happening was mostly, no pun intended, trumped up. And what an interesting explanation. I don't, who knows whether one story or the other is the more real. But I always like stories about it having a different explanation that's not immediately intuitive, but that makes sense upon examination. I love the idea that it's, one, not the authorities saying we're going to be indicting or arresting or anything necessarily at all, or this week or any other week. But in addition, the more exciting, I thought, the more intriguing stories, in every sense of the word of intrigue, is the idea that it was Trump complaining that he was going to be indicted or arrested. And then the initial thought, he's trying to, he's calling for protest and unrest and possibly a wink, wink, nudge, nudge call for violence. And that's what he's really after. Although that also seems unlikely that people would really follow up with it. But more intriguing still was the idea that what I'm really doing here is creating outrage, not enough to cause, protest and violence, or at least not on a major scale that would really cause disruption, because it's just not enough time to organize something like that, even if we wanted to do something like that, or even if we had the, the wherewithal to put something even minor together in a couple of days. But that the real target is the rest of, or at least his major challenger in the primary field. What an interesting thought. If I am going to be targeted for anything, for either more investigation, indictment, arrest, anything, I need to it would never have occurred to me that this is one of those areas in which Trump is a bit of an evil genius, I think. It would never have occurred to me that the play here, if I'm facing criminal charges as a candidate, is to try somehow to force the rest of the candidates to either defend me or face accusations that they're not sufficiently loyal Republicans somehow, and they certainly, or would be disloyal to MAGA nation, and that MAGA ought to withhold their support. Never forgive, even if DeSantis somehow becomes the nominee. You as a loyal MAGAist can never actually show up in November to vote for Meatball Ron. I love that name, because he sold out your hero, Donald Trump, by not defending him from indictment, when really the natural reaction ordinarily for one candidate when their opponent in the primary is indicted is you say, yeah, that guy's a scumbag. Don't vote for him, vote for me. And then we'll be in the clear to run, on the up and up in November. I don't know whether DeSantis can also avoid court entanglements, but that's not his problem to defend just yet. Anyway, I thought that was rather genius if that's what's going on. Sometimes, though, I have the feeling, and I think I always prefer the story that he's stumbling into his genius because, as a result of being such an incredible narcissist. Like, only a narcissist would imagine that, yeah, there's a viable path here for me to demand that my immediate opponents defend me, or else something bad will happen to them. No, ordinarily, I think most people would imagine something good will happen to if you press the attack. Kick him while he's down. That's exactly what you should be doing. And only a narcissist would imagine that there was any possibility that you could turn it to your benefit if anyway, so after the fact, it becomes genius because I can't believe that worked. It's so crazy, it just might work. And then it does work. And then you say, wow, that was a prediction. But, oh, well, one thing that the basketball weekend teaches me is that a lot of these genius predictions, they go running around looking for the guy who predicted Princeton and or FDU's upset and declare that guy a basketball genius, except he also, as it turns out, he picked all the 116 games to go the other way. And 3 of them make him look like an idiot and 1 makes him look like a genius. And then, a week later or at the end of the weekend when the first 2 rounds of games are over and he's in last place and no shot at scoring any more points because all of the number 1 seeds have been eliminated in his bracket, whatever. You get the idea. Anyway, okay. So, I don't know. Maybe you don't get the idea. And it doesn't matter because at this point, if you don't, you were never going to get it. There might not have been an idea there at all, now that I think about what I've just been saying. Okay, let's see. What other things do I have on tap to share? There are many. Let me see. Do we need to? Well, I don't know if we need to. I put away the CNN article about the Georgia prosecutions, but I think we're kind of on top of that stuff. It was an intriguing headline. And really, just to make sure that we got to it, Georgia prosecutors considering racketeering and conspiracy charges in probe of effort to, whatever it is, overturn the 2020 election. Overturn Trump's 2020 loss. Source says, did Don Lemon really write this? Are they just crediting him for it? Don Lemon and Jason Morris. I have a feeling maybe Don Lemon was getting ready to go on air, and Jason Morris wrote the thing up. And they shared credit for it because I'm sure Don Lemon's been following the story, but I don't know. Does he? Do their on-air, top-level on-air personalities really spend any time writing out the written side reportage of CNN? I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if we really need to go any further into it. It's racketeering and conspiracy now, I think, probably because, they probably could have done it on the one phone call that we all heard, but as it turns out, like Greg said, and as we mentioned last week, there are now 3 taped phone calls to 3 different targets in Georgia, all, with Trump and his staff prevailing on them to just report different numbers. and if you can't explain what the discrepancy in the numbers is, you can just say it's all screwy. That's all I'm saying, and we're investigating, and we'll get back to you, and let us handle the PR of how it could possibly be that the numbers have reversed themselves out of thin air. All right, but I think we're up to date on that stuff. So perhaps we spend our time digging elsewhere in Pocket and see what we have to share. There are many interesting stories to share. Two that, let's see, the other one I have to bring up on screen here. But my brother Mark has sent on a couple of stories that might warrant a little bit of investigation. What's the story that he sent me this morning? I don't think I've even... Oh, okay. I guess one story about what's the headline here? Never mind about Ron DeSantis. I'm curious about why we're not supposed to worry about Ron DeSantis. But I will say this. I caution you, Brett Stevens is involved in this story. So, I don't know. I can already see where this is going. Now that I think about it. So maybe let me preview this one before I even bother sharing it at this point, because it strikes me now, knowing Brett Stevens, is it a story like, are we going to end up, or I bet there's a reaction out there already of people saying Stevens is downplaying DeSantis's fascism. And don't worry about it, either because we don't think he'll make it to the Republican nomination, or fascism isn't so bad. I don't know. Brett Stevens isn't a guy I necessarily want to trust on that stuff. But one of the other stories that does look more intriguing from an insular KITM inside joke angle is, remember last week when we were talking about the guy whose name we learned to pronounce recently, thanks to Greg's research, Guo Wengui, and how he's mixed up in everything, and his name comes up in the context of Bannon and Trump world frauds, but also in the context of the 1MDB investigation and the whole huge story that we spent so much time on and still didn't get halfway through it, on the Pras Michel story. Remember that there's still looming out there, if you didn't read it over the weekend on your own, the Rolling Stone story in which Pras tells his own version of what happened, and we may yet return to that. Anyway, remember that there was some mention in seizing the assets from Guo Wengui, that there were somewhere involved in his various properties were, I think, several $36,000 mattresses. You remember mention of that? It was just a brief moment, but it was obviously meant to shock people. Like, oh, this guy's really wasting his money. Was it Guo Wengui's properties that we were talking about, or was it Joe Lowe's property? Now that I think about it, I'll have to look back. And where did I get? Was it an email, I think, that Mark contacted me? I'll have to take a look around and see if I can find the thing. But anyway, he got intrigued by it too, in the way that KITM listeners, if you can sit through this show, it's probably because you have similar questions and similar curiosities. And so what's the story about these $36,000 mattresses? What could that possibly be about? So he went and looked. And he found out, and he shared an article, or at least a link that I thought I might tell you a little bit about from the Rob report, which, as I recall, was a thing launched like in the early 2000s during like the .com boom when everybody was becoming a billionaire. And the Rob report was like a magazine style publication. I think they actually had a physical paper publication. Maybe they still do. I don't know. Because they're into wasting money. The whole idea of the Rob report was, if you are one of these people who've just been minted as a billionaire thanks to the .com boom, when it was a boom, right? Here are some things you might want to waste your money on. Like, you don't know what to do with your money, and you're afraid of looking commonplace by buying a Ferrari. You need some sort of bespoke vehicle that no one's ever heard of. And how can you spend your money ostentatiously, but ostentatiously enough that people will say, I want, what is that? I need to look it up, and then I can be that ostentatious. So here's the deal in the Robb report, which, let's see. I mean, they have different verticals here. So different ways for you to waste your money. Cars, yachts, aviation, watches. I mean, to give you an idea, I'm going to spend as much on my watch as I do on a car, a yacht, or a plane. Style, questionable. Home, if you want a mansion and it's got to have a screening room and a wine tasting room and a wine barfing room in case you have to do that as well. You got to have a different room. Food and drink, the wine that you barf. A travel and a gift guide in case you want to give an ostentatious thing to somebody else. Well, I guess the home section here is some report on these stupid mattresses. First look, it says, when was this published? I don't know. They don't bother dating these things because I know they do. Here it is. They put it over March 22nd, so it's a current issue. We haven't even this is March 22nd of last year. So already these mattresses are out of style. You need a $56,000 mattress to be cool. Here we go. First look. Hastens? I don't know how you would pronounce Hastens. And there's is it an umlaut if it's over an A? Hastens, like Haagen-Dazs? I don't know. Is that a fake thing? Hastens unveils a new $36,000 bed in honor of its birthday. And honestly, who could possibly give a crap one way or the other? Even at Hastens, they can't really be that intrigued by the birthday of the company. We have to have a new kind of mattress. But in this sort of world, I guess you do. Available starting March 22nd of last year. Exciting. The new model, now old and boring, comes with a customizable mattress and a lavish velvet headboard. This thing is the whole bed is $36,000. It sounded to me like the story we were reading the other day was that the mattress alone was $36,000, but that might just be thanks to inflation. I don't know. Rachel Cormack is the person who had to put their name to the fact that they were being asked to write about fancy beds for a Crazy Idiot magazine. Hope she's moved on since then. But if not, congratulations to you, Rachel. And maybe they send you free samples of all the crazy high-end stuff to get you to write about it. That's not a bad gig if you can get it. From a $400,000 luxury mattress for Drake to a custom circular bed spanning 14 feet made for the Pocono Gardens Lodge. You can give them a call if you want to have your honeymoon there. 226-0841. You might remember the telephone number if you're from the tri-state area. Yes, it later became the beautiful Mount Airy Lodge, but you probably know it as the Pocono circular bed. Wow. Let's see. So these are the things that they do. One of the things they made, a $400,000 luxury mattress for Drake. It's stuffed with who knows what, the circular bed. This Hästens company, their creations represent the creme de la creme of bedding. Maybe. And its latest sleeper is no exception. The family-run Swedish outfit, wow, has just unveiled an exclusive new model, fittingly christened the Drēmær, that is D-R-E with the long E vowel sign over the E, and M, what did they call that? That's the schwa sign. Drēmær. In other words, Drēmær. But because they're Swedish, I guess they're like IKEA and they like naming all their units something funky and weird. Drēmær. Well, it's a bed. Okay. It was inspired by the power of the human mind and the endless possibilities of manifestation. It's very clear that, I mean, it looks to me like maybe Rachel is in on the joke that she's writing for this publication. Anyway, coinciding with the mattress maker's 170th anniversary. I'm sorry, I didn't realize how important. 170 is a pretty big deal. And they were making mattresses back when it was like, this is a bag of straw, but it's Swedish straw. It's very luxurious or something. And they've been making mattresses ever since. And I would venture to say that for the first 125 of their 170 years, no one gave a crap whatsoever about, the luxuriousness of these mattresses. I assume they made some feather ones, maybe. That's true. Maybe at some point they switched over from straw to feathers, and they were the bed makers to Europe's now decapitated royalty. Anyway, the Drēmər also pays homage to founder Pehr, P-E-H-R. I don't know if that's a title or is that a name? But he probably should be going by Pehr because his next name is Adolf. Pehr Adolf Jansen. And the 6th generation of Drēmers, that is to say, and for some reason it says here parenthetically, master craftsmen, who helped establish Hästens as a major luxury name, which I would know if I was a luxury kind of client, I'm sure. There are probably blue-blooded royalty all over listening to this show. They're not. Saying, how can you not be familiar with this fabulous bedmaker? The Drēmər was penned by world-renowned interior designer Ferris Raffaelli, who previously designed the Gran Vividus model, owned by the aforementioned Canadian rapper, that's Drake, I guess. Like its high-priced predecessors, the lavish bed was meticulously handcrafted across more than 300 hours in the company's state-of-the-art Santa's Workshop in Köping, Sweden. So, I guess they make these mattresses by hand one at a time. It's not really a great model, but in a world where there's people with money to spend, I guess there's always somebody will buy one of these stupid things. Do you care about the rest of it? No, probably not. But, by the way, this is somewhat interesting. Like, if you thought, how could this be a 170-year-old mattress company in Sweden? They've been making mattresses. And again, for most of that time, there really wasn't such a thing as premiumized mattresses beyond we can make them with straw or we can make them with feathers. Well, as it turns out, it says later on down here, paying homage to Hästens' heritage as a master saddle maker. Okay. So it's stitching things and maybe making a little bit of padding, whatever. I get what you're, that I believe you could sustain a business over 170 years making fancy pants saddles and then maybe upholstering carriages and then maybe upholstering, early automobiles and then switching over somehow into mattresses, whatever. Anyway. So, paying homage to that, Raffaelli upholstered the bed with a signature woven checkboard fabric based on the brand's horse monogram. It's reminiscent of the fabric featured on the Gran Vividus and available in the same 4 colors. And who cares what those colors are, but anyway, so there you go. Lots of people are wasting lots of money. There's people starving in the streets, but somebody's got a $400,000 mattress made by a guy who used to make saddles or whatever, and the world deserves its fate. Okay. So let's see. Among the stranger stories to share, let me share this short, weird one before we launch into the other big story of the weekend that wasn't basketball, that we really have to get around to, and I think you probably already know what it is, and you're wondering, when are we going to get to it? Well, the answer is, after I get to this AP report, that you should be aware that this maybe you've been reading some of the things, and maybe you might even have inadvertently become influenced by it, or maybe this whole storyline here is BS. You tell me what you think. AP reports under the headline from David Klepper, pro-Moscow voices tried to steer Ohio train disaster debate. And note to the college boy about this one. He might be interested to find this out, although I'm sure he would be indignant to find out that it's the case. But there's a lot of people who have been it's hard to be excessively indignant about the East Palestine train derailment. It's a honest to God, full-blown environmental disaster. But there's been some very strange horseshoe theory of politics type freakouts on the extremes that now meet in the middle these days about who's to blame. And it's been very odd, and you should know That, according to the AP, soon after a train derailed and spilled toxic chemicals in Ohio last month, anonymous pro-Russian accounts started spreading misleading claims and anti-American propaganda about it on Twitter, using Elon Musk's new verification system to expand their reach while creating the illusion of credibility. Not only were they spreading propaganda, but they were buying Twitter blue check marks so it looked like they were legit sources. The accounts, which parroted Kremlin talking points on myriad topics, claimed without evidence that authorities in Ohio were lying about the true impact of the chemical spill. The accounts spread fear-mongering posts that preyed on legitimate concerns about pollution and health effects and compared the response to the derailment with America's support for Ukraine following its invasion by Russia. Some of the claims pushed by the pro-Russian accounts were verifiably false, such as the suggestion that the news media had covered up the disaster, or that environmental scientists traveling to the site had been killed in a plane crash. But most were more speculative, seemingly designed to stoke fear or distrust. Examples include unverified maps showing widespread pollution, posts predicting an increase in fatal cancers, and others about unconfirmed mass animal die-offs. I did see a bunch of those. Biden offers food, water, and medicine, shelter, payouts of pension and social services to Ukraine. Ohio first. Offer and deliver to Ohio, posted one of the pro-Moscow accounts, which boasts 25,000 followers and features an anonymous location and a profile photo of a dog. Not that the idea is the dog is typing this, but that the author's photo, conveniently not there. Twitter, not that you couldn't generate one from artificial intelligence, etc., etc. But anyway, Twitter awarded the account a blue check mark in January. Regularly spewing anti-U.S. propaganda, the accounts show how easily authoritarian states and Americans willing to spread their propaganda can exploit social media platforms like Twitter in an effort to steer domestic discourse. The accounts were identified by Reset, a London-based nonprofit that studies social media's impact on democracy, and shared with the Associated Press. I mean, maybe they're lying too, but hey, I don't know. Felix Carte, K-A-R-T-T-E, a senior advisor at Reset, said the report's findings indicate Twitter is allowing Russia to use its platform like a bullhorn. With no one at home in Twitter's product safety department, Russia will continue to meddle in U.S. elections and in democracies around the world, Carte said. Twitter did not respond to messages seeking comment for this story. The 38-car derailment near East Palestine, Ohio, released toxic chemicals into the atmosphere, leading to a national debate over rail safety and environmental regulations, while raising fears of poisoned drinking water and air. The disaster was a major topic on social media, with millions of mentions on platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, according to an analysis by San Francisco-based media intelligence firm Signal Labs, which conducted a study on behalf of the AP. At first, the derailment received little attention online, but mentions grew steadily, peaking 2 weeks after the incident, Signal found, a time lag that gave pro-Russia voices time to try to shape the conversation. The accounts, identified by Reset's researchers, received an extra boost from Twitter itself in the form of a blue check mark. Before Musk purchased Twitter last year, its check marks denoted accounts run by verified users. You know the story behind this. Often public figures, celebrities, or journalists. It was seen as a mark of authenticity on a platform known for bots and spam accounts. And you might wonder, hasn't everybody heard that you can just buy one of these things now? Yes, no, I'm not really sure, but there are always millions of people sort of slow on the uptake, or just who have been conditioned to think of these blue check marks as meaningful. And I heard the story, but I just think it's never really absorbed what it actually means. Anyway, Musk ended that system and replaced it with Twitter Blue, which is given to users who pay $8 a month and supply a phone number. That's all there is to it. Twitter Blue agrees not to engage in deception, or Twitter Blue users are supposed to agree not to engage in deception and are required to post a profile picture and name, but there's no rule that they use their own. So you put a dog there and Voila, you are suddenly in compliance. Under the program, Twitter Blue users can write and send longer tweets and videos. Their replies are also given higher priority on other posts. The AP reached out to several of the accounts listed in Reset's report, and in response, one of the accounts sent a 2-word message before blocking the AP reporter on Twitter. That message, "Shut up." So they sound pretty responsible. There's a lot more, including a reference to one account known as Truth Puke, and how you could not believe Truth Puke about the real story of the derailment, I have no idea. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. You want the background on Truth Puke, right? And we'll continue with this story in the AP about how the social media, social media exploitation, possibly by pro-Moscow forces, some of their own, but also some right here in the United States, who may or may not have been instructed to do this. Very interesting. The paragraph leading up to the announcement of the existence of the account Truth Puke, in case you were wondering about the background, is that while researchers spotted clues suggesting that some of the accounts are linked to coordinated efforts by Russian disinformation agencies, others were Americans, showing that the Kremlin doesn't always have to pay to get its message out. I think they found a receptive audience in various parts of the horseshoe spectrum. Some of whom probably had to receive no instructions whatsoever. They're just sort of conditioned to look for these things and interested in them. One account, and I suppose this could be such a person, Truth Puke, is connected to a website of the same name geared toward conservatives in the United States. Only they would be interested in Truth Puke, quite honestly. Truth Puke regularly reposts Russian state media. RT, formerly known as Russia Today, is one of its favorite groups to repost, Reset found. One video posted by the account features ex-President Donald Trump's remarks about the train derailment, complete with Russian subtitles. That seems kind of weird, but not for RT, I guess. But it is sort of interesting that Truth Puke, as allegedly an American, would be so interested. You could probably find that video elsewhere besides RT. But anyway, in response to questions from the AP, Truth Puke said it aims to provide a, quote, wide spectrum of views, and was surprised to be labeled a spreader of Russian propaganda, despite the account's heavy use of such material. Asked about the video with Russian subtitles, Truth Puke said it used the Russian language version of the Trump video for the sake of expediency. We can assure you that it was not done with any Russian propagandist intent in mind. We just like to put out things as quickly as we find them, the company said. And it just so happens that the first thing we look at for news is RT, and gosh, how can you blame us? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's what's happening, but that's because you've fallen victim to Russian propaganda. You enjoy it, and that's the first thing you turn on when something happens in the news. You should probably get used to that. Admit it. Other accounts brag of their love for Russia. This is different from their love for the shape of Texas, right? In love with shape of Texas. And one of my favorite of all times here. Others say, right, like they say, they brag about their love for Russia. One account on Thursday reposted a bizarre claim that the U.S. was stealing humanitarian earthquake relief supplies donated to Syria by China. The account has 60,000 followers and is known as Donbas Devushka, after the region of Ukraine. I would look out for something named that, but okay. Another pro-Russian account recently tried to pick an online argument with Ukraine's Defense Department, posting photos of documents that it claimed came from the Wagner Group, a private military company owned by Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Yevgeny Prigozhin, really, a key Putin ally. Prigozhin operates troll farms that have targeted U.S. social media users in the past. Last fall, he boasted of his efforts to meddle with American democracy. A separate Twitter account claiming to represent Wagner, depending on how you want to pronounce it, actively uses the site to recruit fighters, it says. Gentlemen, we have interfered, are interfering, and will interfere, Prigozhin said last fall on the eve of the 2022 midterm elections in the U.S. Carefully, precisely, surgically, and in our own way, as we know how to do, Prigozhin said at the time. So, all right, if you too have found yourself unusually persuaded by the by purported news of what's happening in East Palestine, you might consider perhaps the source and dig a little further and just be sure. I mean, there's plenty of bad news and bad actors that would no doubt be revealed by genuine reporting as well, but just be careful, I guess, of who and what your sources are on that matter in particular. Okay, so there are other things. Oh, by the way, before we get into the longer of the stories, I will add that there is one more legal issue churning its way through the courts involving Trump or, I don't know, Trump, the Trump adjacent. The Hill has this story by Zach Schoenfeld, who reports the Trump D.C. hotel dispute with House Democrats, believe it or not, lands at Supreme Court. I think this one has gone without much notice on the show. So let's take a quick look at what's going on here. The Supreme Court is poised to decide if it will take up the case. Oh, I see. So the answer is no, and then they're not really poised to do anything. But we'll decide whether it will take up the case on whether Democratic lawmakers should be able to obtain documents related to former President Trump's former D.C. hotel, a popular meeting place for GOP power players during his administration. There was a few blocks from the White House and really did deserve to have been investigated the whole time. But now that Democratic lawmakers who are seeking this, if they are in the House, are in the minority, who knows what sort of power they may yet have. But at the time that they made the request, they were legitimately in control of the House of Representatives. And I wouldn't be surprised if the courts now said that whole thing is moot because you're the minority now, which just serves to reward the delay forever tactics that Trump used both before he was in the White House and then once he was there. It would be a very sad story. The Democratic lawmakers filed the suit in 2017 after asking the General Services Administration, who's really the bad guy in all of this, to produce various financial records related to Trump's hotel in the old post office pavilion, which is owned by the federal government. If Armando is listening, his blood is boiling already. This is something he called out immediately, even before Trump assumed office, even before he was elected to office. We knew that this was going to be a huge issue, and the GSA was approaching this entirely upside down and backwards. They filed suit in 2017. It's now 2023, and they're going to end up saying, yeah, we can't help you because the whole thing is moot. He will have wasted 5 long years in this litigation, dragging it out to the point where the Supreme Court could seek cover from having to decide this thing by saying, who cares now? Well, this was a major big deal at some point, and in order to prevent it from happening again, you should actually decide this case. The lawmakers have accused the former president of hiding a significant amount of debt during the GSA's initial bidding process for the hotel. So we're going back to like 2015 here. They have also raised concerns about how Trump managed potential conflicts of interest while he served as president, including doing business with foreign governments who stayed at the hotel at the same time they were seeking to influence U.S. foreign policy. Trump has denied any wrongdoing, but is in fact guilty on all counts, if you ask me. Supreme Court justices discussed the request at a closed-door conference on Friday. If the court makes a decision about whether it will take up the case, it will be announced Monday. That's today, but I haven't heard anything. But it wouldn't be heard until next term, so even more time wasted. 4 of the 9 justices must agree to take up the case. 3 of the majority conservative justices now sitting on the bench are Trump nominees, which is something they didn't used to have to bother telling you, but now is code for whether or not they're in his pocket. At stake is whether the case could open presidential administrations up to more scrutiny by Congress, even by a political party that is not in power. Several lawmakers who kicked off the lawsuit have since left Congress or died. How about that one? I'm going to just delay this case until the people who bring it die. They've died, and the Trump Organization eventually sold the lease following his presidency. While the case has made its way through lower courts, the last of which decided the case could move forward and Democrats could continue to seek their GSA records, it is an appeal by the Biden administration's Department of Justice that has brought it before the Supreme Court. Biden's DOJ has asserted the lower court's ruling should be reviewed because it would otherwise open up the executive branch, this is interesting, to a flood of lawsuits from a small number of lawmakers. How do you like that? They have to actually take the stance against it. Wow. In essence, the case could create a precedent in which an administration could face much greater scrutiny from a political party in Congress, whether or not that party controls the chamber. The lawsuit was filed by Democrats on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee when they served in the minority during the first year of the Trump administration. How about that? That decision conflicts with this court's precedents and contradicts historical practice stretching to the beginning of the Republic, DOJ wrote in its court filings. The decision also resolves exceptionally important questions of constitutional law and threatens serious harm to all 3 branches of the federal government. DOJ cites, among other precedents, a 1997 Supreme Court case that found lawmakers generally, quote, cannot claim harm suffered solely in their official capacities as legislators. The House Democrats' attorneys responded by arguing the facts of those cases differ from the hotel document dispute, and Congress has authority to provide lawmakers an enforceable right to information. This case is a legal unicorn. There is no conflict among the circuits over standing under Section 2954. You knew it was going to be a standing question, right? Indeed, only 3 times over the course of nearly a century have members sued to enforce Section 2954, and neither of the earlier cases resulted in an appellate ruling on standing or anything else. They wrote in court filings. I guess we should look up Section 2954, see what it's all about. The Biden administration has since drawn rare opposition from Democratic lawmakers who want the justices to leave the ruling in place so that their suit can proceed. This is a wild case. The Supreme Court receives thousands of petitions each year and rejects the vast majority of them. As one factor in their deliberations, the justices look for cases that present important questions of federal law. Monday also marks the first day of the High Court's March argument session, which kicks off with an oral argument over whether the federal government has a duty to address the Navajo Nation Reservation's water needs under 2 19th century treaties. Sort of switching topics here, but that's an interesting one. In the 2-week session, the justices will also hear arguments on cases about patents, immigration, criminal defense, and 2 trademark disputes. One of those disputes is a case that is likely to bring a lighter atmosphere to the courtroom. The justices on Wednesday will consider whether a company violated trademarks owned by Jack Daniels by spoofing their whiskey bottles in a poop-themed dog toy. That is the Supreme Court of the United States, ladies and gentlemen. That might be a lighter atmosphere. I'm trying to imagine what this would be. So did Jack Daniels have its trademarks violated by a company that made spoof whiskey bottle poop-themed dog toys? I can't imagine how you get from Jack Daniels whiskey bottles to poop-themed dog toys. Like, I guess you make a squeaky Jack Daniels bottle? Sure. A squeaky poop to, I don't know. I really have to see the toy in question. And then I'd wonder what I was doing with my life if I actually looked into it. But I might do it later. Anyway, so there you go. Another Trump dispute, and what a wild ride that one is. So in 2017, let me get the timeline right. 2017, Democrats in the minority on the House Oversight Committee say there's real problems with this hotel. We demand information. The majority says, screw you, you can't. Or maybe the House rules were, well, you can subpoena things. The minority sometimes in the Oversight Committee, I guess, could have the power to subpoena information. But then there's some lawsuits. And then in the meantime, while the lawsuit is pending, Democrats win and assume the majority and put the House counsel to work perhaps on getting this information. And then they lose the majority, but Trump loses office and leaves office. So, two ways you could sort of moot the case. But they continue to press it, saying, probably arguing, you can't just run out the clock on everything. If there's a legitimate request for information and you just litigate, appeal, that can't be the reason. You can't just appeal into mootness every single time. It's really important that the court establish some precedent that, yes, eventually, information has to come out and you have to face the music for stuff that you've done that might be a violation of law. And who steps in with the Biden Justice Department, defending the prerogatives of the executive branch. It was a different executive at the time, but the branch remains the same. And we don't like the idea, and they have a good point here. We don't like the idea that the House minority can subpoena documents from the executive branch. They might perhaps concede the point, maybe it's okay if the House minority subpoenas information from a private business like the Trump organization, but to be able to subpoena the GSA that's executive branch, and it's kind of different. But really, honestly, we really do need to get to the bottom of how the GSA, even in the first place, allowed the lease to go forward. It should never have happened. And I would like to get to the bottom of that. But yeah, the Biden DOJ says, well, you'll have to do it without giving the House minority the right to subpoena the executive branch. The House majority can do it, but not the House minority. And they got a real claim there. But what a wild turn of events. Okay. Well, anyway, here's what I really wanted to get to, which was the big story of the weekend besides the basketball, which we're never going to make it all the way through, but we have to start talking about it and start talking about the implications of it. I think you already have guessed which I'm talking about. This is the one headlined "A 4-Decade Secret," one man's story, and it's really several men's story, of sabotaging Carter's re-election. A prominent Texas politician said he unwittingly took part in a 1980 tour of the Middle East with a clandestine agenda. Peter Baker is the writer here. Not everybody's favorite at the New York Times, but I'll give you a taste of what's going on, and then we'll complain bitterly about some things. Ready? It's been more than 4 decades, but Ben Barnes said he remembers it vividly. His longtime political mentor invited him on a mission to the Middle East. What Mr. Barnes said he did not realize until later was the real purpose of the mission: to sabotage the re-election campaign of the President of the United States. And I'm sure that was their real bottom line, but let me I'm setting something up for a little bit later. You know the story, of course. It was 1980, and Jimmy Carter was in the White House, bedeviled by a hostage crisis in Iran that had paralyzed his presidency and hampered his efforts to win a second term. Mr. Carter's best chance for victory was to free the 52 Americans held captive before Election Day. That was something that Mr. Barnes said his mentor was determined to prevent. His mentor was John B. Connally, Jr., a titan of American politics and former Texas governor who had served 3 presidents and just lost his own bid for the White House. A former Democrat, Mr. Connally had sought the Republican nomination in 1980, only to be swamped by former Governor Ronald Reagan of California. Now, Mr. Connally resolved to help Mr. Reagan beat Mr. Carter, and in the process, Mr. Barnes said, make his own case for becoming Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense in a new administration. I remember in his view, the mission is, I'm helping Reagan beat Carter. That's a way of saying, well, I'm doing something good for the country because I believe that Reagan would be better for the country than Carter. And I guess it's a legitimate thing that you could have. But, well, you know the story of what happens, right? So again, I'll just leave it right now, leave that hanging for a setup. What happened next, Mr. Barnes has largely kept secret for nearly 43 years. Mr. Connally, he said, took him to one Middle Eastern capital after another that summer, meeting with a host of regional leaders to deliver a blunt message to be passed to Iran. And remember, we had no direct relationship with Iran at that point, so the messages needed to be passed. The message was, don't release the hostages before the election. Reagan will win and will give you a better deal. And again, even that is sort of disguised in what's really going on here is sort of being disguised. Well, we'll work out a deal. Reagan will win. We're just telling you the reality of politics in America. You might as well wait and deal with Reagan. You'll get a better deal out of it. You won't, but I mean, that's what you're going to say to people. Then shortly after returning home, Mr. Barnes said, Mr. Connally reported to William J. Casey, the chairman of Mr. Reagan's campaign. And later, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, briefing him, Casey, about the trip in an airport lounge. Mr. Carter's camp has long suspected that Mr. Casey, or someone else in Mr. Reagan's orbit, sought to secretly torpedo efforts to liberate the hostages before the election, and books have been written on what came to be called the October surprise, but congressional investigations debunked previous theories of what happened. So just for a second here, again, the expression of what is actually happening is being disguised or mitigated in a way. The suspicion is that someone in Reagan's orbit sought to secretly torpedo efforts to liberate the hostages, and the disguise is, before the election. This is all sort of couched in terms of, well, it's really about electoral politics, which is a legitimate thing to be involved in. But underlying it all, it should not be, should not lose sight of the fact that underlying it all is that John Connally, and now by either by mistake or whatever, but by extension, Ben Barnes, the two of them went, Connally chief among them, with the mission of actively working to keep Americans in Iranian captivity. No better than Ayatollah Khomeini at that point. They both wanted to keep Americans in captivity, and John Connally worked as Ayatollah Khomeini's ally in keeping American hostages in Iranian hands for political benefit, which actually makes it worse, which is incredible that it's somehow supposed to disguise things. Well, I was really just trying to play American politics. Yes, sure, whatever, but at stake were the lives of these American hostages. And your play was, F them and their freedom. More important to me is my politics. I want my candidate to win, so maybe you'll die in captivity. Maybe they'll execute you. Maybe, I don't know what'll happen. But what won't happen is America seeing you freed from captivity, because if they did that, if they saw that, then they might credit my political opponent with it, and he might win a second term, and we can't have that. He might as well have taken the hostages himself. I spent the weekend being very angry about this. I say, John Connolly's long dead. Exhume Mr. Connolly and dump his body in the ocean with bin Laden where it belongs. That was among the most anti-American things that have ever been done. And Ben Barnes is now coming forward. This is an interesting play. Like, I guess we're supposed to be sympathetic to him. Oh, well, I was unwittingly involved in this. Oh, I don't know about that. But what's happening here is Jimmy Carter is in hospice care and facing the end of his life. Ben Barnes now presumably fears burning for eternity in hell for his role in one of the most dastardly, un-American, and unethical and inhuman acts that's ever been undertaken in the pursuit of American politics, and is hoping that Jimmy Carter will be gracious enough to forgive him on his deathbed so that Barnes doesn't have to fear hell for the rest of his days. Presumably he's the kind of guy who believes in such a thing. And honestly, given what he did, he should. Whether it's real or not, I will do my best to convince you you'll burn in hell for eternity for what you did. That was effing awful, and you should fear death and judgment. And you won't have to fear it here in your earthly life because we're apparently not going to be able to touch you for it. Wow. It's really quite an incredible charge, to be honest. Okay. Now the backstory of how they entirely missed that and how congressional investigations debunked all the previous theories of what happened. Despite the fact that we now have this new evidence, they missed that because apparently Mr. Connolly did not figure in those investigations. His involvement, as described by Mr. Barnes, adds a new understanding to what may have happened in that hard-fought pivotal election year / effing treason. And not because, it's not like it's treason to not re-elect Carter. It was treason to work to keep people in captivity so that Carter would lose. I don't care whether, in that sense, whether Carter does win or lose. We all have lived with the consequences. I can do it again. But keeping those people in captivity for political purposes is, of course, what I'm focused on. Well, anyway, that all adds a new understanding of what may have happened in the hard-fought pivotal election year. It was so crazy it just might work. Perhaps Chuck Todd might have said about it at the time. With Mr. Carter now 98 and in hospice care, Mr. Barnes said he felt compelled to come forward to correct the record. That's the subtle hint that he fears hell in all of this, or whatever else might be coming. Even in his mortal life, the condemnation he might otherwise face. I think he's really hoping for the last Carter presidential pardon. History needs to know that this happened, Mr. Barnes, who turns 85 himself next month, said in one of several interviews, the first with a news organization about the episode. I think it's so significant, and I guess knowing that the end is near for President Carter put it on my mind more and more and more. I just feel like we've got to get it down some way. Well, you may have to go down in some way in order for us to have, dealt with this sufficiently. Anyway, it's very interesting, and I guess it was Connolly being the major player in all of this that seems to have thrown the investigations off track, and that's unfortunate in its own right. But meanwhile, I guess Barnes's story, since we got to wrap up before we're going to get anywhere near the end of this story, but I do encourage you to read it all. We'll probably return to the theme at some point. That might be something Joan wants to speak about a little bit too. We'll see. At any rate, the idea that Barnes was an unwitting participant in all of this, he may or may not have known what the eventual, what the real bottom line mission was. But if you spent 1980 flying to Middle Eastern capitals and meeting with Arab world leaders and the Israelis too, it's true, but you weren't discussing Israel-Palestine peace process or the conflict or anything like that. You had a pretty good idea what was going on. And of course, by the first meeting, when you hear somebody say, hey, you know what? I want you to tell the Iranians to keep everybody in captivity until after the election, and they'll get a better deal. And that was obviously a big lie anyway. I mean, it betrayed a major misunderstanding of American politics. If the Iranians got that message and said, yeah, probably Reagan will, in fact, give us a better deal, not that they would have had any basis to have understood or judged American politicians at that point, but I don't know. I guess if they read a newspaper, which they might not because they didn't speak English in many cases, they probably would have seen that they were not likely to get a better deal from Ronald Reagan. Anyway, the point is, really, as soon as you saw the itinerary, without even hearing the contents of the message that Connolly was going to be delivering to Middle Eastern leaders at the time, if you took a good look at the itinerary and realized that you were going to be going to Egypt and Syria and Jordan and who knows where else, it's actually all listed here in the piece. Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel. You probably had a pretty good idea of what was going to be discussed. And, of course, once you sat through the first meeting, there's no unwitting anything about it at that point. So I don't know how much forgiveness I have in my heart for this guy, but it's probably considerably less than Jimmy Carter has in his heart for pretty much anybody in the world. And I don't know if it's the great play to, or is it the right thing to forgive? Certainly not to forget. But I don't know. I have a feeling Jimmy Carter will deal with it with a lot more grace than I have, and you should probably listen to him and not me on this. But I need to vent in order to make space for Jimmy Carter to do what he's going to do. And tell you what, speaking of making space, let's make space for justice next.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
What's he got on tap for you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next? Well, Pence embarrassed himself with his defense of Trump. And, of course, it's now Trump's play to get everybody to defend him. So we'll see whether everybody embarrasses themselves. Let's see. Well, I can't get all of the rest of the previews involved. I never can. But stay tuned, I assure you, of a great show next.